yeah, you would only leave that if there is a bigger opportunity on the table.
Are they just going to foster young talents for other teams?
I don't get the feeling that within Red Bull there's a lot of support for Yuki.
Singapore Grand Prix is upon us, and Paddock Update is here to get you prepped for a weekend in the city-state on the equator, and it promises to be a wet and wild one from all the forecasts we've had so far. But wild is the way I want to start, because I've got Tim Kraaij here from GPBlog, and we've got a potential, Tim, coming out today, pretty fresh, about speculation for a wild swoop from Red Bull onto a McLaren driver. Let's get the clickbait headlines out of the way. It's not like they're going to be stealing Piastri or Norris to go over to Red Bull. But this is still news that seemed unexpected, because we go one series down to Formula 2, where Red Bull and McLaren and a lot of other teams have drivers representing them. But out of nowhere almost, we've had the announcement that a driver is leaving one program and a lot of speculation about where he might be going.
Yeah, not completely out of nowhere for the people that are reading GPBlog. So that's one thing, of course, because a few months back we already reported on the story that we were first to report that Red Bull had set their sights on Alex Dunne, or at least had him on the radar for 2026. Both teams didn't want to respond in a formal statement. There we go. We published that back then that they had Alex Dunne on the radar. It's a very quick, talented driver. There's no place at McLaren. Red Bull are looking to fill their driver seats for Racing Bulls for 2026. And they looked at Alex Dunne as one potential candidate for that seat. They have, of course, their own talents with Arvid Lindblad coming in. They're looking at those options. So that's from a month or so ago. Now, today the news was that McLaren released Alex Dunne from their program right away in the middle of the season, which is quite unique. Normally that's at the end of the season. Sometimes there's not even a press release about that. And yeah, while it can be like a press release in terms of, okay, we release a driver, it feels a little bit like more. It feels like a setup to a move maybe for Alex Dunne, because there have been talks with McLaren on what's next for the coming season. McLaren would like him to drive in Super Formula, for example, and test drive for an F1 team. Seems like a good package deal. And why would you leave that as Alex Dunne if you would only leave that if there is a bigger opportunity on the table, and a bigger opportunity than a reserve role in F1 is a seat in F1. So it feels like a setup where also McLaren maybe now decided that, okay, if someone is joining a rival team in maybe a few months' time, we don't want to have him longer in our hospitality, in our garage, with all the data available half a year before the new season with completely new rules start. So I think it's a combination of all that. First of all, the news right now is that he has been released by McLaren. He will still drive in Formula 2 in the remainder of the season. He's still a contender for the championship fight, as far as I know. So far with the races we still have left as well. And of course, we know that Red Bull has Alex Dunne on the radar. It doesn't mean that he will have the seat, but this all adds up to the main story that there was already a few months back.
Is this a longish standing problem that McLaren are going to be facing when you've got drivers like Norris, Piastri, young talents who, as we've seen so far this year, are pretty evenly matched? They seem to have a bit of a tug of war going on with the championships, have we seen? But this similar situation, should it pass, happened with Gabriel Bortoleto in, I watch a lot of feeder series racing. One of the worst liveries I saw in feeder series, the colour scheme was disgusting. But he was at a McLaren as a junior driver. Of course, he's now not driving for McLaren. Are they just going to foster young talents for other teams going forwards if they're going to stick with a Piastri and Norris lineup for the foreseeable future?
And then nick the best talent of the Alpine Academy to put in your own car. So yeah, it's quite ironic, right? I think that's all. You always have that issue with like the young driver programs, and that's where I have an issue with a lot of those young driver programs where there's a missing step. Like there is no like Red Bull has the luxury position of having that second team in F1, which makes it easier to get talents into F1, give them experience, and then move them up to the bigger team. While teams like Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, if a driver gets into F1, they need to be ready for a top team, and that's a big step from F2 or Super Formula, dare to say. So I think that's a little bit the problem that you have with those junior programs. But my opinion always is the big stars will eventually move up to F1, and if it's in McLaren, like if Alex Dunne would like dominate F3, dominate F2, like Lewis Hamilton did in the past, Charles Leclerc did in the past, he will get a seat at McLaren. But you have a situation where you have two solid drivers at McLaren. Yeah, they don't have a position there. They don't have a affiliated team in F1 that they can, give a driver some time into F1. And now there is maybe a seat open in F1 at Racing Bulls for next season, or there is a seat open. He is in contention for that. So they have to let him go. And the same was for Gabriel Bortoleto. They can give a reserve role, but they can't give a permanent seat right now at the moment. And F1 and joining F1 is always a matter of timing as well. It's you need to be there on the right time. We've seen multiple F2 champions in the past not getting a seat in F1 because the time wasn't right. There was no place for them. And I think it's good that a driver like Alex Dunne, but also with Gabriel Bortoleto before, if there's no place at the affiliated team that they're with, that there's still the option that you can join another team as well.
It's very interesting, and we're going to find out more as probably the weekend progresses. But all things do seem to point. Obviously, GPBlog bringing this to you a while ago is the most key factor. But I find it really interesting from speaking before the weekend really gets underway, just a few hours after this announcement, that it was shared so readily by members among the Dunne team. And I don't think if that was McLaren have waved me goodbye and I'm distraught about it, they'd be sharing it so loudly. So I definitely think something's coming, something's brewing there. I'm really excited to see where this might lead. And this is meant to be F1 Paddock Update, but we need to talk also about Max Verstappen stepping away from F1 again. It's a story that it was what entertained us last weekend after Azerbaijan. Before Singapore, Max Verstappen still racing. This guy is addicted to going to cars and driving very fast. This time it was into GT3 racing, and I don't know if the word surprising is, because Max Verstappen surprising is the right word, but Max Verstappen is such a talent. He wins the race, does very well in the race as well, and he seemed as happy as he looked after his first victory. I'm sure you saw the same pictures I did where we were doing a little side-by-side with the GT3 winning his first F1 win. This has all got to be building up to something greater, Tim, for next year, surely.
Yeah, it feels like it. Also, like with how he proceeded all this. So, like 3 weeks ago, of course, he already went to the Nordschleife Nürburgring, where he went for his license, first of all, to race on the track. And he raced that weekend in the NLS series in a GT4 car, so with less horsepower. And still, he won his series, and it was quite competitive with the other cars as well at some points in that race. And then we had 2 weeks later, last week, a weekend where he went again to the Nordschleife. He had a training session on the Friday and then the qualification and the race later that day, the 4-hour race on the Nordschleife in those GT cars, this time in the GT3 car. He drove for his own Verstappen.com racing team with Emil Frey Racing in a Ferrari. So he won in a Ferrari. That's also a big thing. That was not the headline. So, he won in that Ferrari. They didn't have pole. They had P3 after the qualification. He had some issues with traffic and stuff. But then in the race, already with the start, he took the lead and drove away to like a minute or something like that, when Chris Lullam, a British driver who drives with for Verstappen.com Racing, took over, and he kept the lead, and they won the first race that they participated in, that GT3 class. So, it looks very good. For next year, it looks like he's setting up for the 24-hour of the Nürburgring. That's not in a race weekend. The qualification is, though, but the race itself, it's not. So it looks like he's setting up for joining that session. It's no secret that Max likes to do those endurance races. He does it on the sim, and he would like to do that in real life as well. But there are complicated things in there as well with F1, with completely new racks next year, with new engines, with new cars, with new tires. There's a lot to learn for the team. So I think he will leave it quite late to make the decision to go or not. But yeah, everything he's done so far in the last few weeks is all leading up towards a bigger race in those endurance races.
Yeah, and it's one of these fun things that we've seen that Ferrari be. It makes me laugh how people criticize the media for going straight into clickbait titles, where all the memes immediately were wins in front in a Ferrari before Lewis Hamilton does. But then some people brought out the Ferrari McLaren Spygate scandal from years ago. Internet, a lovely place to be if you're a Formula One driver. It's a lovely place to be if you're watching F1 Paddock Update as well. And if you are, please do subscribe and let us know what you think about all these situations. We read any comments that come in. Let's go and talk about F1 because that is the name of the show. And let's stick with Max Verstappen. And he's going into this weekend in a different mindset from where it might have been at summer break, because the wind seems to be in Red Bull's sails at the moment. And a lot of the stories before we got to the GT3 were about Max Verstappen and his chances of getting back into this championship fight, or if he's even in the championship fight. You've seen enough championships, Tim. It would be quite a, no offense, it would be quite a good job for him to claw back into contention. But is there any chance he could actually win it?
Is it grey already? It doesn't feel like it. Yeah, it would be something. Like last year, people spoke about Lando Norris getting back in the championship fight, could be the comeback of the century. And I was like, no, not really, because McLaren had the most dominant car for most part of the season, but the McLaren guys didn't win that much. This season, though, would be quite different. This would be a real interesting comeback if he makes it stick. But that's the big point. We've had two races where Red Bull has been more competitive. Not only Max, but also Yuki has been in points, especially in Baku, the last race. They were there and Yuki was there. And I think that's the biggest example of Red Bull being better with their car again. And I think it's all a lot of people talking about the floor, and of course they had a floor update which worked, but I think it's a lot of things. Like Christian Horner left the team, of course, with Lauren McKees coming in. I think first of all that already changed a little bit the vibe within the team. You feel it's a little bit more positive. They get out of that negative spiral and they start a new trajectory. I think that's one bit. But also Laurent started to ask questions. They start to approach things differently. Like, for example, how they set up their engine during practices, because they also always did the practice sessions on Friday with a lower engine mapping. Yeah, a little bit from the time where they were dominant. And Laurent was like, yeah, why are you doing that now? Because you're not learning how you qualify properly or how you race properly with the engine full on. So start on that from Friday. So it's like these little things that are now trying to get more also towards the liking of Max, but also in a positive way for the team. They relied a lot on tools, on the CFD data, on the wind tunnel data, and try to set up the car with that, not really thinking about what maybe the driver would like or the drivers would like. And now they use a little bit more logical sense, if that makes sense. So they try to go from race to race, think about it. What have we done before? What do we like here? What could work here, and less reliant on data, and then that following up with a good update that works. And we've now had two races, and yet it were low downforce circuits, but in both races we haven't heard one single complaint about the car from Max, and that's been for 2 years now that we've not have that. It was like there was no complaint during the race in Baku. Max is finally happy again with his RB21. The balance is better. They find a good balance to get this car sorted out. And I think that is the most important win for the team, to give both drivers a car that they can fight with, that they can trust, so they can go race. And I think if you give Max a car that he can go qualifying with and that he can go race with, yeah, you have a race winning driver in your car. You have a championship fighter in your car. So that helps. And then, yeah, looking at the two races that we've had, Singapore will be a bigger test, of course. And I think that's the main thing, that there is still a little bit of people hope for that comeback. People hope for the exciting last part of the season. But a lot depends on this weekend, because Baku and Monza, although not completely the same, they have some similar traits. And Singapore is completely different. It's much more like Zandvoort. It's much more like Hungary, Monaco, where Red Bull have been horrible this season and also last year. And Singapore normally as well. So it would be a big turnaround if they are competitive here. But if they are competitive here, we're gonna go up for some nice ending of this season.
I think we deserve it after, I think you've called it tepid or something in the past, how unexciting this championship fight has been. I'm going to link us back and go off script. Apologies, put you on the spot. But you mentioned Tsunoda, and I find it so interesting because it has been an overlooked part. It's always been a one-car team for a lot of the season. That wasn't the case, and he was a bit on the front foot and the offensive in Azerbaijan. And it's one race, but you're only as good as your last race. Tsunoda was good. Going back to the Alex Dunne part, is Tsunoda the other half of the Red Bull team? Is he able to actually fight for his seat and his future at this point? Or do you think the changing with Honda and Ford is actually writing his own death sentence there?
I still think that Yuki Tsunoda at Red Bull Racing is a dead end. He's racing there this season, of course, also with the backing of Honda still this year. And I don't get the feeling that within Red Bull there's a lot of support for Yuki moving into next season. Yes, he's performing now a little bit better. He's getting more consistent and he's now getting points on the board as well. And that helps, of course, a lot his case, but more Racing Bulls, so to say, because over the years, yeah, they've been happy with Yuki. There have also always been a few issues with Yuki, his performances in his communication with the engineers, in his feedback on the car, his feedback from within the car, sometimes over board radios as well, and his dedication in terms of training and work ethic for F1. And I think those type of things are biting him in the ass right now in terms of a top seed. You need to be on top of your game. And with Isaac Hadjar performing so well in that Racing Bull seat, I think it must go it must be a big turnaround in the rest of this season to turn those sides. But I think it's quite clear that the people at Red Bull really like, that the management at Red Bull really like Isaac Hadjar. And I think Verstappen and Hadjar will be the lineup for Red Bull Racing in 2026. The Racing Bulls lineup is a more difficult story because we've basically have 4 drivers for those 2 seats. We have Yuki Tsunoda being named for maybe a turn, a comeback at Racing Bulls. We've still Liam Lawson in that car, but yeah, he's performing at some points in the season, but overall being outclassed by his teammate Isaac Hadjar, of course, this season. We've Arvid Lindblad in Formula 2, a very high-rated driver in the younger series, a Red Bull driver, but yeah, in F2, his season has declined a little bit. There's not been that extra step that Red Bull would like. So that's why they're looking outside of that pool as well, with probably or maybe an Alex Dunne on the radar as well. So they have basically 4 drivers for those 2 seats. And I think even for Racing Bulls, it would make sense to have at least one experienced driver in that car when you start out with new racks, with new with new tires, with a new car, with a new engine. You want some experience. So I think from all of those drivers that you can pick from, at least Liam or Yuki will be in one seat. That's my guess. It's not based on any information, but it will be one of those guys, and maybe Dunne or Lindblad in the other seat. That's what my gut feeling is about the future of Red Bull.
We'll find out very soon, and it would be the long-term future as well of how that team operates. Let's go back to the championship fight, and there has been all this talk about, well, is Max Verstappen in the championship fight? That extended to going into the press conferences at Singapore, and Lando Norris obviously in the championship fight, but finding one of his allies, long-term friend George Russell, not being as supportive as he might have liked.
Yeah, there was Was no, I want to say tense atmosphere, but that was not the case. That would be a good clickbait. No, but they got asked about the chance that Max Verstappen has on a world title, and they would like a percentage, and Lando didn't give a percentage. But then they went to George, and he was sitting on the bench alongside Lando, and I was looking at Lando, and it was like, 100%. I was like, okay, Max is going to win the championship if you listen to George. But yeah, that was, all jokes aside, I think over the whole grid, you heard the respect that people have about Max, and I think the line that you hear most, it's like, it's Max, and that's why people don't want to rule him out of the championship five, even the championship fight. Even the McLaren guys, of course, they are also aware of what Max can do, and that if Red Bull have found a little bit of extra, that Max will be there every race, and I think that's why those guys in the pressers, they're all calm as always, Lando and Oscar. But I think they will feel the pressure because, if Max gets a little bit closer, if he gets competitive this weekend, and there's a lot of rain on the horizon as well, we will talk about it a little bit later. But like you said, we deserve a final like this, man. Oh, that would be nice.
A bit of a chef's kiss right there. We didn't put this in the script, actually, but Piastri, let's talk on him for a second, because that last weekend was so un-Piastri-like. He had the championship, not necessarily in his hands, but his to lose. It didn't really go terribly for him, how Norris also struggled, but he must be going into Singapore thinking, I need to get back on the wagon, because you can afford maybe one weekend, maybe two, of how long the seasons are like at the moment, but he can't be going into these final rounds with another race like Baku. What happened, and do we think it's going to be a repeat in Singapore with another right-angled street circuit?
Yeah, Oscar was all again in his usual mode where he just spit out like all the PR phrases on that it was an off weekend and stuff like that. We know those phrases, and we know Oscar not to be one of the big headlines in that way. We don't expect him to be, but I think we spoke after Baku as well, and I think we spoke about a blackout during that 1 minute in the race, and I think that was it. It was a error in qualification, and it was an error, and another error in the Grand Prix. It was or 4, I think. It was the false start, and Andy Saul then trying to overtake in that corner. It was a lot, and he needs to fight back. The big thing for him is that Lando didn't take full advantage of it, and that keeps the championship fight, in a way still interesting, but it still feels like a missed opportunity for Lando. And Singapore was a weekend where last year Lando did a lot of good things because he won and he was the fastest man the whole weekend. He was close to some walls as well, and he was very lucky to get away with that win eventually with some hits that could also cause to a DNF. So this will be a very tricky weekend with possibly like those severe weather conditions that we have now. Probably not that severe on Saturday and Sunday, but it will be interesting to see how those drivers will cope if the weather predictions are to become true.
Let me talk about these weather predictions as our final thing before we go off for this weekend to see how the weather predictions actually pan out. Singapore, we've seen before, nice little poem there, but we've seen before in Singapore that the weather can come, it can really hit with monsoon-like weather, monsoon-like rain, biblical levels in some regards, but then they just delay the start. By the time the race starts again, the humidity there, a little bit of surface water. I've seen the internet get into such sensation about it's going to be a soaking wet race, Stroll's going to win and all of this. Is it likely, or are we going into a weekend where we're not going to see the blue wet weather tyres anyway, and it might be a little wet at the start, and that's about it? I know I'm not really asking you to predict the weather because that's very difficult, especially on the equator, but the F1 just won't allow it to be a torrential street race, surely.
No, not torrential rain, but I think what could spice things up already a little bit, especially on Singapore, where the walls are so close, which you've seen in qualifying in Baku as well. If there's a little drizzle, it takes away so much of the grip, and there comes so much more down to the driver. And yeah, we've seen how Max performs then in qualifying in Baku when there is some drizzle and a lot of drivers are failing to set a better lap time than some other drivers did before. That's where the bigger drivers come floating about, and yeah, that's where we know as well that the McLaren drivers are never the ones, or rarely the ones, that are getting on top. So that would make things a little bit more interesting. Will it be a torrential rain? Will it be a fully wet session? No, we never drive on those full wets, so we won't see a race on full wets. But if there's a little bit of rain, if there's a little bit of a drizzle, we can have situation where a Lando Norris or Oscar Piastri decides to pit earlier, or decide to go to a slick tire earlier on a wrong time. So I think, like I said, more comes down to the driver in those type of situations. And yeah, it would be nice if we have those, unexpected, situations during the qualifyings and during the race to get more out of the drivers. And it would make the championship fight a little bit more exciting, because like you said, we spoke a lot about the championship fight that is not a fight between the two McLaren drivers who are just easing towards the final race, and then do rock paper scissors to decide who win the championship. But if you get Max in there, you have a whole nother layer to your championship fight, and then it becomes a real fight. And I think that's what we like I said, what we want and what we need. So let's hope that Max can be competitive, and I don't expect him to win. I think that's will be too big of a task if you look from where Red Bull came from, with Hungary and Zandvoort in our minds. But if he can be P3 behind the two McLarens, and you think of the races we have after that with Austin, with Mexico, with Brazil, 3 races where Red Bull can be competitive again, where we've seen Max excel in the past as well. I think if he can be close, if Max has a car that he can win with, he will win. That's the whole difference with the two McLaren drivers, of course. And I think if he can be competitive here, we can be very sure that they will be very competitive in at least 5 of the last 6 races. I think Las Vegas will again be a little bit more tricky, although Baku was good as well. So I think all those other tracks will be very good. So this is really a one-off in the last few races that we have on this calendar. So if he can be even remotely competitive to the McLarens, we have a title fight on our hands.
Well, let's see if the rain comes. I somehow got that right back on Max Verstappen, thinking about how wet it's going to be. But I really hope it does. Not pour, but has a little bit of a drizzle. It's never seems to be the case in Singapore, because, like you say, Max Verstappen can excel, and we might have another Carlos Sainz on the front row, and who knows what. It's that unpredictability we want to see in Formula One. The grid is so close right now, and a little bit of unpredictability at a street circuit could really open up this championship and turn it into an actual fight rather than rock, paper, scissors. A very good analogy there. We're going to find out, of course. And Sunday, we'll be bringing Paddock Update, again with Tim and I. We're talking about everything that happens in the Singapore Grand Prix. Tim, as ever, you've been great. Thank you for everything that you've brought to us. And thank you, everybody else, for watching.